to be invited to address this organization of Kenyans who have been able to know that this country belongs to them and they don't have any other country. Even if you moved anywhere else, you'll be a foreigner, or you'll be a resident, or a citizen by paper. And you might be locked out some offices. Even if you went to America and became a citizen today, you can't be president of America because you are not a complete citizen. But here, you can be everything. You know that? That's why it's very important to protect this space. What's our story? Because I'm one fellow who believes that if you don't have a story, you don't exist. So what's our story? And our story as a people has been shaped by a lot of history that we did not control, that controlled us. My brother talked about Kenya having been started as a private company. It is true. We were never established along the lines of the Westphalian states of Europe, where the people were at the center. We people did not matter. So our story has also been shaped in a very big proportion by our faith. We are people who are now professing mainly Christian and Islamic faith. The two faiths are basically two sides of the same coin. They trace their origins to Abraham, and they are anchored in the book of Genesis. And so I want to begin in the book of Genesis. And the book of Genesis, we are told that creation took 6 days. On the sixth day, man was created and was shown everything that God had created, which was good, and he was told, you will be in charge of them. And the thing man was told, and when I say man, I mean male and female, is that you will live in paradise. I'll put you in paradise. Again, I'll give you paradise. So he was put in a garden where there was everything. But he was told within this paradise, you will not govern yourself. You will be governed. And he was told there's a law. Thou shalt not do ABCD. So, you find that the rule of law is laid at the foundation of the Judeo-Christian Islamic faiths. That mankind lost paradise when it disobeyed the law. And then I come to a point where I look at it and I look at the temptations, the way they are presented. And you ask yourself, if only Adam and Eve had said no, we would still be in paradise. Isn't it? You are believers. That's what we are told to believe. If only Adam and Eve had said no, we would be in paradise. And you run through the same books to Revelation, there's a recurring theme of when to say yes and when to say no. And basically, to God, we are supposed to say yes. To the devil, we are supposed to say no. That runs through the books. So you'll find Abraham says yes, and it's not bad. And it goes through. So if I want to jump now for the Christianity that I profess, we come to the Christ. The Christ, I'm Catholic. We believe in the Immaculate Conception. The Christ is conceived without blemish. But the devil is not comfortable. He wants to destroy him. So the first way the narratives are told, the devil tries to destroy the Christ when he's a child, through Herod, when he ordered the killing of the children in that area. And an angel of God tells Joseph, take your wife Mary and your child and run to your people in Egypt. So he obeys it and does it, and he goes. And the Christ is saved. So we keep hope alive. Then the Christ comes, and the temptations come. And the devil comes with a new formula. If you denounce God by bowing before me, I'll give you everything. You'll control the world. And from my understanding, if the Christ had said yes, the salvation would have failed. The Christ said no. And there are very many instances that you find in the books where saying no is the game changer. So if we lost paradise because Adam and Eve failed to say no, then we must learn to say no if we want to keep our country. Otherwise, we are going to lose this country. So, when we engage, we give ourselves the Constitution, and that's the law. That in the paradise that God gave us, called Kenya, there is a law. Obey the law and keep paradise. You keep your country. Disobey the law, you will not keep your country. And that's at the foundation of what motivates me. That the thing that is killing this country is disregard for the rule of law. Corruption is theft. In fact, I don't even like the word corruption. I don't use it myself. It mischaracterizes the problem, makes it sexy and desirable. When you say this is a corrupt man, he looks good. A corrupt man looks better than a thief. Okay? So this mischaracterization of this crime of theft by servant is a problem. And the cure is the rule of law. I also want to go back to scripture. If you look at the organization of the old society, if you reduce it to a sketch, if you are sketching and I have to sketch what the society in Judah in a traditional Israel was, you'll find that it had only 3 pillars. You had the priest worshiping and praising God. You had the prince governing. But you had the prophet demanding justice. Today, we still have the priest or the imam or in the Hindu temples. But most of the time, and they do very well, they praise God. They worship God. And so, the priestly church, if I may call it, that is defined by elaborate cathedrals, Holy Family Basilica, All Saints Cathedral, the Major Sitam. There are so many big, elaborate and beautiful places of worship. Jamia Mosque, what have you, very beautiful. They are all praising God and are doing a good thing. But I ask myself, where is the prophetic voice? Yet God told us we are created in His image and likeness. And the closest I can get to God is by looking at you, not at the skies. And if I have to worship God, I have to worship God in you, not in the skies. So when you are being destroyed by bad policies, by bad governance, and here I am in a beautiful cathedral, in a beautiful mosque, burning incense or singing mashairi, then are we worshiping God? So we must begin worshiping God in our fellow human beings. We must be concerned about what my neighbor eats. We must be concerned about those things. And now in the modern design, with the prophetic voice not being in the churches and in the mosques and in the Hindu temples and wherever, society tried to create a prophetic voice, called it the professional. The professional is supposed to be the prophetic voice in a secular society. And whereby, when I use secular, or the word secular, I don't use it in the sense of secular being the exclusion of God from public spaces. I use secular in the sense of neutrality of faith in the public spaces, not the exclusion of God. So when we have this secular society, then we get the provision whereby we are told you have professionals. You have engineers, you have lawyers, you have architects, you have all these professionals. When a professional, when you go to a road and you find a pothole, that a new road and it has a pothole, and it has got a certificate of completion to standards, the devil is not the politician. The politician signed nowhere. Even if the money ended up with him, he signed nowhere. It is the lawyer who dropped the contract, it's the engineer who certified the road, it's all those things that are happening to us. And that's why our country is failing, that the professional voice has failed. But all of these are failing because the rule of law is not working. If the law was working and a road fails and you go for that engineer and his license is withdrawn, there'll be no corruption. If a contract has been drawn that results in a country losing out, right now, I've been fighting the SGR thing from 2011. Recently, the Supreme Court overturned my victory in the Court of Appeal and even insulted me, called me names, which I'm going to walk into the offices of each of those judges and ask them, why are you insulting me? And I'll do it. I take no prisoners. I have no time to take prisoners. I can't maintain them. I kill them. So I'm going to walk there and ask, why did you do this? But anyway, away from that, they were able to play around and justify the SGR. That's not a problem. I've moved on into the Senate. Using the platform of the Senate, I got experts, auditors, and said, can you look at the books of Kenya Railways, the books of the Ministry of Transport, the Treasury, as regards the SGR, can you do a forensic audit? What they've come up with is mind-boggling. We have paid 900 billion shillings. They claim it, the general thing is they are saying it was only 360 billion. 900 billion shillings has gone. The railway was technically financed using Kenyan money. There was no need for a single coin from China, and not a single coin came from China. And then you want to tell us that our people are poor. How? The SGR loan is due for repayment. If you read the Business Daily last week, to the one the issues highlighted for repayment, this thing we are fighting in the finance bill, a big chunk is 70% of the finance bill is to raise money to pay debts. And people are dying because they can't afford 50 shillings to buy maramoja for malaria. in this country here. So I've moved a motion in, I hope they'll give it the chance, the space to be heard. I've moved a motion in the Senate, and the people who did the audit, the experts, have signed on to it and are ready to testify. We want to know how we are paying people a loan which we did not get a single coin of. Not a single cent came from China into the consolidated fund. The other day I spoke on Spice FM. People thought I was crazy when I said, according to the records, you have overpaid our debt by 1.3 trillion shillings. They thought I was crazy. But if you are smart enough, you would have realized that I was not condemned by any authority. It is gospel truth. The other day, the Auditor General and the Control of Budget were before the National Assembly, and they both said they don't know. They have no record of the public debt. If you look at the central bank accounts, which are published on their website, for public debt repayment over the last 10 years, and you look at the purported debt you have borrowed, you'll find you have paid, plus the interest, you have repaid by 1.3 trillion shillings more. So money is leaving the central bank, and it's not going to pay debt, it's going into people's pockets. One of the issues I'm fighting right now, the finance bill. If you look at Article 220 of the Constitution, it defines the components of a budget. And broadly speaking, it requires that the national government must declare revenue estimates. You want to do ABC, where is the money? So if it says it's going to tax, we are going to impose VAT, we are going to add 8 more points, so raising it from 8 to 16%. What is the estimated revenue if you are going to raise by that? So that the Constitution requires that the revenue be declared in the budget. And so that you give revenue estimates, how it is, this is estimated money you can raise, taxes, grants, and loans. For loans, there is. For grants, there is. But for taxes, there is nothing. Now, they have come and go down the expenditure very clearly. I wrote to Parliament and told them, you guys, the National Assembly, you know, under Uhuru Kenyatta, they decided to lock the Senate out of the budget process, which was wrong, and we are fighting to restore that. I wrote to them and said, for heaven's sake, can you publish the revenue estimates so that I can know the taxation measures you are taking can do ABCD? They did not. So we are now fighting, and we have reached where we are, and the likelihood, I don't see that thing surviving, because I'm training very heavy guns on it. I've done my research, and when we were in Busia, those who watched in Busia, in the church in Busia, when everybody was praising the president, when my chance came, I told the president, we are friends, but the Constitution is a greater friend to me. And I told the president, Your Excellency, there's no need for friends to fight. Go and withdraw those things and do the right thing. Instead, he came up and said, you people of Busia, tell your senator not to take me to court. They went ahead. They did what they did. I went to court. We are in a stalemate that could have been avoided. But I'm giving this narrative to say that to fight corruption, you have to be informed. You have to be informed of the power of information. And corruption in the public sector is the rule of law, not morality. Corruption in the private sector is for morality. Corruption in the public sector is the rule of law. We must know the law, and we must apply the law. And the reason they don't publish revenue estimates from taxation is very simple. The law only allows the national government to borrow to do development. So if they were to show that their taxes will generate so much, then they would end up with a deficit for some of their recurrent expenditure, which would require borrowing. So they hide that so that after the budget is passed, they can borrow from the domestic market to finance their current expenditure through these things called the treasury bills. Those are the things that are undermining the paradise we call Kenya. We're undermining the law. We have also laws that are there. You've got this thing called the IMF Act. Take your time, go look at it. Hold the Constitution of Kenya in one hand and hold the IMF Act in the other hand. It's arrant nonsense. It's a tool for neo-colonization through the economic control of the Republic. And we have to fight these laws. We have to stand up for our Constitution. We have to ensure that we are ruled by law. And I'll tell you one thing. These fellows whose currency is money, not conviction, believe everybody has a price. Right now, if you look at the kind of money I've been offered to withdraw the petition, has reached 200 million. But I tell them, my price is one. If you can't govern, vacate the office for those who can govern. I'm not taking a coin. I don't consume beyond my means. I drive a Demio, even I've come in my Demio out here. I don't drive because with a Demio, when I put 5,000 shillings in it, I forget I have a vehicle that needs fuel. You see that? So, let us stand up for this country. And the question of public debt. When Kibaki left, our public debt stood about 2.4 billion US dollars, 2.4 trillion Kenya shillings. When Uhuru left, it was nearing 8.4. It is now past 10 trillion. Then you ask yourself, where is all this money going? If they can't show anything for it. So we must come down and ask ourselves, these debts that are killing us, that are killing this nation, whereby now they are saying university students, you have no school fees for you. And I've told you the budget, the current budget of Dr. William Ruto, the president, 70% of it is to go and pay debt. So we cannot sit pretty on the question of debt. If it's taking 70% of our budget, it's a state of war, and we must go to war. We must ask ourselves, what did this money do? We must be given a register of what the money did, how it was borrowed. The other tragedy is that of the money that has been declared as a debt, the Constitution requires that only Parliament can approve debt to be borrowed. And Parliament does that through an Appropriations Act. If you take the Appropriations Act from the time after Kibaki left, and I'm using Kibaki cut off because the new Constitution came into power. This was the first government that was really full with the new Constitution in 2013, when you got the devolution and what have you. So when you begin the Appropriations Acts for the 10 years of Uhuru, you find that the real debt that Parliament approved is half what the Treasury has published. So who authorized this debt? And if it was not authorized by Parliament, do we have to pay it? Because the essence of Parliament is that there's no taxation without representation. So if you are not represented when this debt was incurred, is that a foreign debt? Is that a sovereign debt or a private debt? To me, it's a private debt. It belongs to a regime, and we should force the regime owners to pay. They are wealthy people. We can auction them and pay that debt. No, there's no other way. If you want to survive, we have the law, the Constitution. Fidelity to the Constitution means making painful decisions. If anything, the Constitution itself says in Article 226 clause 5, it clearly says that if you are in public office or in political office and you made decisions that resulted in the public losing money, you are liable whether in office or out of office, dead or alive. Why can't we use that clause? It's not an idle clause. We must breathe life into it. The Constitution does not have no legs or hands or heads to operate in it. It depends on you. We must do that. And we must, if we go back to history, the doctrine of odious debt, when the American, the US, kicked Spain out of Cuba, and Spain had muscled Cuba with a lot of debts, the Americans rejected. That's when the doctrine of odious debt came up. It says these were debts by the Spaniards for the benefit of Spaniards, for the use of Spaniards. How do the Cubans pay? The same principle must apply. That the debt issue has to be dealt with. Those who are lending know very well that Kenya is a republic. And a republic basically means a government of laws, not of men. It's a government of laws. So if we are a republic, and we have got a constitution, and it says this is how you can borrow money in Kenya, or lend money to Kenyans, and you go ahead and lend, then this time where we should tell the Jubilee regime, those who own the Jubilee regime, and now those who own Kenya Kwanza, because they are maintaining the same trajectory, can you go and talk with the Chinese in Beijing and sort out your issues? And leave us alone. Because if we don't do that, the debt is going to kill us. We have no country, and the debt is a result of violating the law. I don't know if you get the importance of the law in the order of things. So I want us to be very, very keen on how we engage with this thing called corruption, which I call theft. The Eurobond, when it happened, I did not know about it. Somebody very knowledgeable, a young man, he comes from Nyeri, came to me and said, can I have a chat with you? That was in 2015. And they said, okay, what's the chat about? He began discussing things I did not understand. So I said, can you treat me like a nursery school kid? And unpackage this thing in the language as if you are teaching a baby. Then in the many words he said, he told me, you know, these people went to borrow money, the Eurobond, to finance ABCD. But after they borrowed the Eurobond, they kept it offshore. It didn't come in here. But they came back to the local markets through the banks and whatever, and issued treasury bills and raised enough money to balance the budget. So they borrowed twice. They kept the money, they became billionaires. Here we are. You saw the Panama Papers, for those who are curious. You saw the names mentioned there. None of them works outside this country. None of them has got business enterprises that are minting millions out of dollars out of this country. But they had a lot of dollars are stashed out there. It never comes here. And that is what has happened to a lot of our debt. They have borrowed money, it never comes here. What comes is the debt into the register, but the money remains out in private ownership. We must interrogate and audit our debt and only pay that which benefited us. That which did not benefit us should be paid by those who borrowed for their personal gain. And that's very important. Because if we don't do that, we are going to kill this country. We are going to lose the paradise we call Kenya. We are still in paradise because in this space you can be who you can be. The other day, in that case I told you about the Supreme Court, in a very idiotic manner, and I use the word deliberately, the judges of the Supreme Court, trying to avoid my petition, which had said this procurement was not done properly, pronounced that the government of Kenya procured from the government of China. You know very well that the government of Kenya is not a procuring entity. It procures through ministries and departments. Now, when you say that the debt belongs not to Kenya Railways, there's their debt, but it belongs to the government of Kenya, to the Kenyan state, so to speak. And the state is the totality of the national and county governments and all their assets. Are you saying that we secure the SGR using the collateral called Kenya? Or we are taking over Mombasa Port and operating it for 40 years to pay our debt back? That's how people can become idiotic in their offices and make pronouncements without, and I'm using the word deliberately, and I'm ready to defend myself anywhere. It was an idiotic decision. It binds this country to the Chinese loans and whatever in a manner that should not have happened. And as a result of that judgment, I said, what is the option 2? Option 2 is let us audit this debt. Let us audit the SGR accounts. And we were surprised to find that we don't owe the Chinese anything. And so the records that say we owe the Chinese money have to be demolished. And so I filed it in the Senate. It has not been given a date in the House. But I want all these people to come and we ask them questions. What happens? How come these figures? And these are government figures. These are government figures. The Supreme Court told me last time I could not use documents given to me by Transparency International because I'm not Transparency International. I could not use documents given to me by NEMA because NEMA was not the author of those documents and he had not received those documents for purposes of giving them to Omtatah. That is arrant nonsense. And that's why I'm telling you this, because we are facing a situation whereby a court in this country has become rogue. It has become rogue. It is doing things that are not in the public interest. The other time after the presidential elections, one of the judges went to Twitter to begin threatening me. And I exposed him. Now, 5 judges have sat and in their judgment insulted me as a gun for hire. So those kind of things for me are things we must resist. Otherwise, this thing you're calling corruption is being entrenched in a manner that we shall never be able to fight it. We must go back and say the law is supposed to be simple, supposed to be understood by everybody. Let us apply the simple law that we have. We still have glimmers of hope in the lower courts. But the upper you go, things are getting difficult. I don't know if it's because of the age of the judges, because they were trained. Most of them, when you look at the other quotations, they quote the British system. The British system is something very true, because when you look at the younger judges, they quote South Africa. But the older judges like quoting the British laws. But in Britain, The courts only exist to do what? To determine the intention of Parliament. What was the intention of Parliament when it was doing this? The only time you have seen them try to strike out a decision by Parliament is when somebody sues them against the European Constitution. But now they are also out of it. So they keep on quoting the British system where Parliament is supreme. Here, Parliament is subservient. It's the people who are supreme and have given a constitution. We are not subjects of the monarch. We are citizens. We are citizens. And so the constitution must be applied as it is, not as judges would like to have it. And this is happening mainly in the top courts. And we have to deal with it. Otherwise, there's going to be a problem. I've seen something in Israel, which I don't know. You have seen the demos in Israel, where there's some group or a section of the society is saying, now we need to get a situation whereby we review some of the decisions of the apex court. We don't want to get there. Here we might even want to begin asking, how do you people in the judiciary apply public participation? Which is supposed to bind anybody who is interpreting and applying the Constitution. How do the judges apply it? But we don't want to go there. Because the judges at the lower level are performing an excellent job. So that decision on the SGR was really a rollback on the rule of law in this country. That when government, the so-called, they came up with something called government procurement, is not subject to the law. That's basically what I was saying, that if the government of Kenya decides to deal with the government of China, the laws of Kenya are irrelevant. We can't live like that. The government of Kenya is a creature of the Constitution of Kenya, and as we say in my mother tongue, a river does not flow higher than its source. So the government of Kenya, which is a product, a child of the Constitution, cannot be greater than the Constitution. So as I wind up, we are going to craft a modern society that will be able to industrialize in a very short time. And I want to borrow something from the Turkish intelligence service, foreign intelligence service. They have a motto that goes that nothing is impossible. The impossible only takes a bit longer. So we are in this fight to redeem our country, to entrench the rule of law. And the next presidential election, we must demand that those who want power in this country must promise us just one thing, the rule of law. And everything else will function. The rule of law is very important. You talk of Singapore, you talk of the Asian tigers. If you look at the way they developed, most of them were developed by dictators. There was a dictatorship of sorts, but a dictatorship for the common good. If we can get the dictatorship of the law, we'll still have a democratic government where we elect governments. But if the law is supreme and it's a dictator, that whoever goes against it suffers the consequences, we will be able to develop this country. Without the law imposing sanctions on leadership, we are going to continue this con game. And it's a con game. The kind of thing that Christ asked, who among you, if his son asks for a loaf, you'll give him a stone. A piece of fish, you'll give him a snake. An egg, you'll give him a scorpion. That's what our government is doing. They are using our needs to exploit us. They'll come up with elaborate programs like Galana Kulalu. Beautiful name. Then use Galana Kulalu to steal from us. You see. They can come up with things like they were trying a greenfield, whatever, airport extension, whatever. They use it to steal from us. There's a debt we are paying today. There's a debt we are paying today. In CAD in 1974, we are paying for a fertilizer factory that was constructed in Dagoretti in Nairobi in 1974. Even with a microscope, you can't see that thing. But we are paying for it. It's in our debt register. We are paying for it. We have paid off the debt the British Crown used to bomb the Mau Mau in Nyeri. That debt, we have paid it off now. But it has been on our debt and our books. Something that was used to kill our own people, we are paying. So we need to come up and educate ourselves and understand this country and understand how the neo-colonial state works before we ask ourselves, why did the rain begin beating us? Let us not be like the American wrestlers. Have you watched American wrestling? I like watching it for one lesson, that you must engage where it matters. If you pick your opponent and throw him outside the ring and begin clobbering him, the referee does not see. And that's a lot of what we are doing in this country. We are engaging in arenas that will not deliver. Let us find it in ourselves to realize that we have got no other country but this one, and this country is the paradise that we have, and the only thing we need to do to keep it is to entrench the rule of law. The rule of law, the rule of law, the rule of law, and all else shall fall in place. Thank you very much, and may God bless us.